and Sid Gilman was the coach. And I was in New York on one of those All-American shows, and Roselle calls me, he says, Billy, we're gonna draft you #1 tomorrow. I want you to come over to Philadelphia. The draft's in Philadelphia, get it? I said, look, I don't even know where Philadelphia is. He said, well, there's a train, go to Central Station, get on a train, come over here. I said, Coach, Mr. Roselle, I really, he said, look, I'll pay you $300 to come over here for expenses. He said, the ticket's $20. I said, that's a pretty good deal. So I went over there and met with him, and he says, we're gonna draft you #1, and we're gonna give you here's your $300 check for expenses, and we're gonna give you like 3 or 4, a $10,000 bonus, and we're going to give you a contract for $10,000 to $12,000. Well, that's more money than ever been on the north side of Baton Rouge. I wouldn't have to stand on the pocket and rub with no quarters to rub together. So I said, yeah, that sounds good, because knowing what Jimmy was being paid and how good he was, it was very nice. And so I signed a contract with him. I come home with a $10,000 check, and a $300 check. I was on top of the world. So Bud Adams called me from the Houston Oilers, said, now Billy, we're forming this new league. I said, well, Bud, I'm already committed to play with the Rams. And he says, yeah, but they're gonna play you on defense. I said, what? He said, they're gonna pay you on defense, and I'll pay you a lot more money. I said, well, Mr. Adams, between me and you, I've already signed a contract with him. He said, let me come over and bring my lawyer. So I'll never forget it. Alvin Roy set the deal up, and we met at R.O. Rush's office. And he said, I'll give you a $10,000 bonus and a $35,000 contract. Unheard of. Completely crazy. Only one guy in pro ball was making more than that, and that was Charlie Connolly. And he said, we'll do a 3-year contract. I said, well, I already got this contract. He said, he turned it over to the lawyer, and he explained that this is a contract, the one I signed with the Rams, only if approved by the commissioner. But he couldn't get it approved by the commissioner because that would tell him that he was tampering with a college athlete. And so R.O. looked over the things, and R.O. Rush advised me that's R.O. and Alvin were big buddies, and he said that it would be, I should sign that. And they would take care of all the legal fees and all that, so I signed with them. Now, Mr. Adams brought me $10,000 in cash. More money than I ever seen in my life. And I had to go the next week somewhere, and I stopped by the American Bank, and went in to see Mr. Clifford Uso, who's the president. I said, Mr. Clifford, I got a problem. Well, son, how can you have a problem? He'd already read it. And he said, how can you have a problem? I said, well, I got this money. I want you to hold it for me, put it in the desk. I'm going out of town. I don't want to leave it at the house with my wife, and I don't want anything bad to happen. Just, would you keep it for me? He said, yeah. So I said, Mr. Clifford, I got to run. I got a meeting, and I left. All of a sudden, he comes running out of the bank. Billy. What, Mr. Clifford? He said, here's your receipt. I said, I don't need a receipt. I know you. He said, no, this is banking. You need to keep this receipt. So he kept the money for me, and I get a call the next day from, I believe it was Winnipeg in the Canadian League. And I said, you know, I've signed with the Rams, I've signed with all of them. I'll be glad to sign with y'all too if you got a nice bonus. He said, Billy, I think we'll have to pass. But it was a hectic time, a fun time. And I took some extra licks from it in the pros. And they'd get up and say, well, okay, money man, welcome to the big leagues. That's all right. So we went ahead and we won 2 championships at Houston and lost in a double overtime to Johnny Robinson and Engster. It was the Dallas Texans then. And got introduced to pro football. Introduced to some fierce competitors, and one of them, of course, was George Blanda that I played with, was my quarterback there. And after I got traded to Oakland a couple years later, he got traded out there. And my body wore out before his kicking toe did. I think he played 22 years, something like that. He was a fierce competitor. Al Davis called me and he said, you know, I got a chance to pick up George Blanda. He said, what do you think about him playing? How would the kids around here accept him? I said, Coach, he'll play for you. He said, no, I don't want him to play. I just want him to kick. I said, well, Coach, he'll play for you. And I said, the kids will love him. So he brought him in cost him $100 to pick him up off of waivers. And he brought George in. Of course, George's history with the Raiders was he'd sit there on the bench and watch the other guys play. And when he had to go in and bail them out, Darryl Monica especially, he'd go in, he knew what he was going to call before the game started. I'd hurt my back in Houston, and we went to some function that I had to go to. And he had his wife Betty asked me, she said, Billy, are you going to play again this year? And I looked over at George, I said, I don't think so. George says, man, we're going to play so-and-so. I said, do you know what that game plan would do to me? They put me back in the hospital. He laughed and said, don't worry, I got the game plan. And I was at Houston 4 years. We had 5 head coaches in 4 years. We won a championship the second year. And we're voting shares. You know, you vote a share for the equipment man. So they came up to the head coach. And they said, well, what about Wally Lemon? I said, well, why should he get a whole share? He wasn't here but 8 games. Didn't matter that we won all the 8 games and got us into the playoffs, and we won a championship. But playing in Houston was fun. The mismanagement, and then you get with Al Davis in Oakland, and he was a player's coach. It was a great time. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I get to rambling, see what Charles had to put up with for a whole year.
But your pro career has not been as celebrated as your college career, but you played 10 years.
11.
Well, 11, all 10 of the AFL years.
Right.
He was the first player taken in 1960 and played through 69 when the league merged with the National Football League. And in those first 10 years, you were on 3 championship teams and 2 teams that went to title games.
Right.
You played in a Super Bowl.
Super Bowl 2.
33-14. You recall that one in Miami, Florida?
Sadly, I do. We didn't play our best ball game. Our quarterback didn't know the game plan. It was so funny. At Oakland, you had to be in the motel the night before the game, home or away, and curfew was at 10 o'clock. So every night, on Saturday night, prior to a football game, on Sunday, we'd gather in Jim Otto's room, and Jim would go to sleep on one bed, and we'd play poker on the other bed. And every game, same guys. George Blanda, Harry Shue, myself, and at a certain time, Blanda would have to get up and go to the quarterback meeting. So we're playing Houston. in the playoffs. And so George gets up. When David Grayson takes his place, when George comes back, David gets up. This goes on for 6 years. So he goes to the quarterback meeting, comes back, sits down, smart ass Dr. Cannon says, well, George, I got reservations to go back to Louisiana tomorrow. What do you think? He said, well, you can cancel. He knows the game plan. And sure enough, I think we beat him 53-6 the next day, which was sweet because George and I both, George threw me 2 touchdown passes, and us being former Oilers, it was sweet. And so the next week, we're in New York City to Waldorf Astoria, and we're sitting there, and same card game. George gets up, goes to the quarterback meeting, comes back. Grayson sits down, gets up. Well, George, I got reservations to go back to Louisiana tomorrow. What do you think? You all think I ought to give him up? He said, you better keep him. He don't know what he's doing. Oh, man. It just ruined the card game. And sure enough, we went out there and he didn't. And of course, they had another quarterback named Joe Namath. And he was hot as a pistol that night. And they beat us. But that was we had the team that could have won the Super Bowl that year.
The year after you lost in the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Yeah. You lost to Green Bay and then lost to Namath and the Jets.
Coach Lombardi had us pegged to a T. He had 2 of our players that had been in his training camp, Howie Williams and Ben Davidson.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, Ben Davidson set a Super Bowl record. Of course, there was only 2 games with 13 tackles. But they ran at him 26 times. The bad news, they ran right at, Ben had a habit, he'd stand up and peep before he'd pass rush or take on the block. And they knew that, with that line, and they just ran right through him. And Howie had a bad habit, that he would peep into the backfield a little too long. Well, Max McGee caught a post over him, and Boyd Dowling caught a post over him. So Lombardi showed us what he could take off of his memory and take off the film. We were not a competitive opponent that day.
Well, you've been out of football now longer than you were alive when your career ended. I'm talking 1970, your career ended when you were 32. So lots happened since then. What does this university mean to you?
Oh, geez, it just, LSU, looking back, was a great field, a great place. We got a great education, made great friends that have lasted a lifetime. The interaction between the players and the professors, we had great professors. And I don't ever remember a professor leaving. Willard was in my Spanish class. I was the valedictorian. To get a C, I had to promise never to speak Spanish again. I get to dental school, they said, Billy, these are good grades considering you played ball I was at University of Tennessee Dental School, but let me ask you something. I said, what? Why did you take this astronomy in Spanish? I wanted to kill my advisor. I didn't have to take 13 hours of Spanish. The athletic department got me a tutor, and he's now the head of the Spanish department at Mississippi Southern. He's from New Orleans, and he says, Billy, I cannot teach you Spanish. You do not know English. This is getting me too foreign languages. What was the question?
We'll take a few questions from you if you have them, but are there any regrets?
Absolutely none. If I had it to do over again, I would be a little smarter and take the high ground more often. Old Daddy had the old saying, it's not how high the peak or how low the valley. It's how far across this damn valley we're in. And when you can, and that's what I like for the kids to take from the book. When you're in a bind and you take the high ground, you work harder, you do more. And the crises are not going to come just in school or athletics. It's going to come later in life. And that's what I'd like for them to take out of the book.
It's quite a ride. Charles, you did a marvelous job, and
Yes,
obviously.
yes, he did.
Billy had to be cooperative. Any questions from you before we call it a night? Yes, sir.
Billy asked Tom one time why y'all didn't wear chin straps, and he told me, he said, well, Billy didn't wear them, and we sort of followed after what Billy did, and I always wondered why you didn't wear chin
I
straps.
just, I didn't feel like I needed it. And after my first year at Houston, I tried to get 2 chin straps. It was just something that, now they have their pants cut off to here.
Right.
It's something we did, mainly when you would make a tackle, your headgear would get pushed back down with one bar, you could flip it back up, it wasn't a problem. And I think that started it, but it was a fad, but not with the big guys.
I heard a report today, we'll get the lead, 87 of 91 players who played professional football who have been tested after they died showed significant injuries to their brains from the contact. And this man is 78, as you can hear, he hasn't really lost a step. How did you avoid that?
You know, I got knocked out in Dallas for about 20 minutes one time. I got knocked dizzy 1,000 times. But I get this strange urge every now and then to print money. So I'm thinking about suicide.